When Naomi Mercer stepped off that stagecoach in 1887 Wyoming, the whole town went silent. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she was confident, though that rattled them too. They stared because she was fat, and she was about to marry a man she'd never met. A mountain rancher who'd advertised for a workhorse wife, not whatever this was. What happened next in that frozen wilderness became the kind of story nobody saw coming. A tale of survival, judgment, and a love that nearly died in a blizzard before it had the chance to live. Stick with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The advertisement had been simple, brutally so. Rancher seeking wife, must work hard, no complaints, right if serious. Coulter Hayes hadn't bothered with poetry or promises. He didn't have time for either. His ranch sat at 8,000 feet in the Wind River Range, where winter arrived in September and sometimes forgot to leave until May. The work was endless, the isolation crushing, and after 3 years of trying to manage it alone, he'd admitted something he hated admitting. He needed help, not hired help. He'd tried that. Ranch hands drifted through every summer, took their pay, and vanished before first snow. He needed someone who'd stay, someone with skin in the game, a wife. He'd sent the ad to 6 newspapers across the territories, expecting maybe 2 responses. Instead, he got 11 letters. Most were from widows or spinsters describing themselves as sturdy or accustomed to hardship, phrases that meant old, worn down, or desperate enough to marry a stranger. Naomi Mercer's letter was different. She didn't describe herself at all. She wrote about horses, specifically about a mare she'd helped deliver during a breech birth when she was 14 and how she'd learned to read an animal's pain before it showed. She mentioned growing up on a farm in Pennsylvania, working alongside her father until he died, then working for her uncle until that became impossible. She didn't explain why it became impossible. She didn't need to. Women didn't leave family farms and cross half a continent to marry strangers unless staying put was worse. Coulter had written back. They exchanged 4 letters total. Hers were practical, asking about the ranch, the altitude, the livestock. His were equally practical, describing the work, the weather, the isolation. Neither mentioned love. Neither mentioned what the other looked like. It didn't seem relevant. Then the stagecoach arrived. Coulter had ridden down to Lewiston, the nearest town with an actual street, on a Tuesday morning in late August. The stage was running 2 hours behind, which wasn't unusual. He waited outside the hotel, trying not to notice how people kept glancing at him. Lewiston was small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, and his business had been gossip for weeks. The hermit rancher finally getting himself a mail-order bride. Folks had opinions about that. Mostly they thought he was either desperate or crazy, possibly both. When the stagecoach finally rattled into view, Coulter felt his stomach tighten. This was stupid, marrying a woman he'd never seen. But he'd committed, and Coulter Hayes didn't back out of commitments. The driver climbed down, started unloading luggage. An older couple emerged first, then a traveling salesman Coulter recognized, then her. Naomi Mercer stepped down from the coach, and the entire street went quiet. She was big, not tall, maybe 5'6", but built like someone who'd never missed a meal and wore it without apology. Her traveling dress was deep blue, well-made but practical, and it didn't hide anything. She had dark hair pinned up beneath a simple hat, strong features, and eyes that swept the street once before landing on him. She knew exactly which one he was. Coulter felt every gaze on them, heard the silence shift into something uglier, judgment spreading like smoke. He walked forward anyway. "Miss Mercer." "Mr. Hayes." Her voice was lower than he'd expected. Steady. Up close, she was even larger than he'd first thought. Probably 200 pounds, maybe more. Her face was round, her arms thick, her whole body the kind that drew stares and whispers in places like this. "Your trunk?" he asked. "The brown one." He grabbed it, heavy. She'd packed like someone who didn't plan on leaving. "The wagon's this way." She followed without comment, ignoring the watching eyes. Coulter appreciated that. He'd been ignoring those same eyes for years. They were almost to the wagon when Vernon Kirkland stepped into their path. Vernon owned the general store and apparently believed that gave him authority to speak for the whole town. "Coulter." Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This the bride?" This is Miss Mercer. Well? Vernon looked at Naomi the way you'd look at livestock you weren't planning to buy. That's certainly something. Coulter felt his jaw tighten. We should go. Just surprised is all. Vernon kept talking. Didn't expect someone so substantial. That's a lot of woman for one mountain ranch. Naomi's expression didn't change. She just looked at Vernon like he was a stain on a wall. Mr. Kirkland, she said quietly, I didn't travel 800 miles to impress you, and I won't be in your town long enough to care what you think. Then she walked past him toward the wagon. Vernon's face went red. Someone down the street laughed, quickly stifled. Coulter grabbed the trunk, followed her, and tried not to smile. The ride up to the ranch took 4 hours. The road, if you could call it that, climbed steadily into pine forest, then higher into aspen groves, then finally above the tree line where the air thinned and the views opened up into something that either looked like freedom or emptiness, depending on your disposition. They didn't talk much. Coulter had never been good at conversation, and Naomi seemed content with silence. She watched the landscape, occasionally asking questions about the terrain or wildlife, but mostly she just absorbed it. The ranch appeared as they crested a final ridge. It wasn't much. A cabin, a barn, a few outbuildings scattered across a meadow that ran alongside a fast creek. Mountains rose on 3 sides, gray peaks still holding patches of last winter's snow. This is it, Coulter said unnecessarily. Naomi studied it for a long moment. How many head? 140 cattle, 20 horses. Water rights? Creek runs year-round. We're upstream from everyone. That's good. She glanced at the barn. That roof needs work. I know. Corral fence is sagging on the west side. I know that too. She looked at him then, and something that might have been amusement crossed her face. You didn't advertise for a wife, Mr. Hayes. You advertised for a ranch hand. I advertised for both. Most men want one or the other. I'm not most men. No, she said quietly. I don't think you are. He showed her the cabin. It was rough. 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, furniture he'd built himself because there was no other option. Clean, but sparse. A place for function, not comfort. Naomi set her bag down, looked around once. Where do I sleep? The question caught him off guard. He'd been thinking about this for weeks, trying to figure out how to handle it, and still didn't have a good answer. The bedroom's yours, he said finally. I'll take the loft. That's not necessary. It is until we figure this out. She studied him. We're getting married. Tomorrow, Reverend Marsh is riding up. But you don't want to share a bed with me. Her directness was like a slap. Coulter felt heat crawl up his neck. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She wasn't angry, just stating facts. I know what I look like, Mr. Hayes. I've known my whole life. I'm not offended by your hesitation. It's not... He stopped, started again. I don't know you. You don't know me. Seems like something we shouldn't rush. That's fair. She picked up her bag. Show me the bedroom. It was a small room off the main living area. A bed he'd built from pine logs, a dresser, a window facing east toward the mountains. I'll let you settle in, Coulter said. Dinner's at 6. Nothing fancy. I'll cook. You don't have to... Mr. Hayes. She turned to face him. I didn't come here to be a guest. Show me the kitchen. The kitchen was a corner of the main room. A cast-iron stove, a dry sink, shelves lined with basic supplies. Naomi inventoried it in about 30 seconds. You've got flour, salt pork, beans, and coffee. That's most meals. That's survival, not meals. She opened a cabinet, found a few wrinkled potatoes. But I can work with it. She did. By 6, she'd made something that actually tasted like food. Fried salt pork with the potatoes, biscuits that weren't rocks, coffee that didn't taste like mud. They ate in silence. Coulter kept sneaking glances at her. In the lamplight, her face had a softness that the harsh sunlight outside had hidden. She ate without self-consciousness, not picking at her food the way some women did. She ate like someone who'd worked hard and earned the meal. The mare, she said suddenly, the one you mentioned in your letter, the one with the bad leg. She's still limping? Some. Gets worse in cold weather. Mind if I look at her tomorrow? After the wedding. Right, the wedding. Naomi set down her fork. Are you having second thoughts? Are you? I asked first. Coulter pushed his plate back. I put an ad in the paper for a wife. You answered. We made an agreement. I don't go back on agreements. That's not what I asked. He met her eyes. They were hazel, he noticed, brown with flecks of green. You're not what I expected, he admitted. Neither are you. What did you expect? Someone older, meaner, maybe missing teeth. She almost smiled. You're none of those things. You expected the worst. I've learned to. She stood, started clearing dishes. But I'm not in the habit of running from uncomfortable situations anymore, Mr. Hayes. I ran once. It didn't solve anything. So tomorrow we'll get married, and then we'll figure out how to make this work. Just like that? Just like that. Reverend Marsh arrived at 10 the next morning, riding a swayback horse and carrying a Bible that looked older than he did. He was a circuit preacher who covered 50 miles of mountain territory, performing weddings, funerals, and occasional baptisms for families too remote to have their own church. Coulter. He dismounted stiffly. This the bride? Naomi Mercer. Naomi, Reverend Marsh. The Reverend tipped his hat. If he had opinions about Naomi's size, he kept them to himself. Shall we proceed? They stood in front of the fireplace, no witnesses except the mountains visible through the window. The Reverend spoke the words quickly. He had 2 more stops before nightfall, and Coulter heard himself repeating vows that felt both massive and hollow. To have and to hold. For better or worse. Till death. When it came time for the ring, Coulter pulled out the one he'd had made in Lewiston. Simple gold band. He'd guessed at the size. It fit. He didn't know if that was luck or fate, and didn't want to think too hard about which. You may kiss your bride, Reverend Marsh said. Coulter hesitated. Naomi saw it, leaned in, and kissed him quickly on the cheek. Congratulations, the Reverend said, closing his Bible. May your union be blessed with coffee? Naomi interrupted. Before you ride out? That'd be kind. While Naomi poured coffee, Coulter signed the marriage certificate. His hand shook slightly. He told himself it was just the altitude. After the Reverend left, they stood in the cabin, married strangers trying to figure out what came next. I should check the herd, Coulter said. I'll start on that roof. The barn roof? You said it needed work. Naomi, Mrs. Hayes, she corrected quietly. The name hung between them. You just got here, Coulter said. You should rest. I rested on the stagecoach. Where's your ladder? She spent the afternoon on the barn roof, tearing off rotted shingles and replacing them with new ones Coulter had cut last spring, but never gotten around to installing. He watched her work while pretending to mend fence line. She moved carefully but confidently, someone who'd done this before. The sun was setting when she finally climbed down. 20 more to go, she said. I'll finish tomorrow. You didn't have to do that today. Yes, I did. She pulled off her work gloves. People in town think I'm a burden. They think you made a mistake bringing me here. If I'm going to prove them wrong, I need to start now. I don't care what they think. Maybe you should. She met his eyes. Because they'll find ways to make this harder if we let them. That night, after dinner, Coulter retreated to the loft and Naomi to the bedroom. The cabin felt strange with another person in it. He'd gotten used to silence, to moving through space alone. Now he heard her moving below, the creak of the bed, water being poured, small sounds that reminded him he wasn't alone anymore. He didn't sleep much. The next morning, he found Naomi already up, coffee made, standing at the window watching the sunrise. The mare, she said without turning around. Can I see her now? The mare was a paint named Ruthie, 12 years old with a front leg that had never healed right after a bad fall 2 winters back. Coulter had kept her because he couldn't bring himself to put down a horse that wanted to live, even if she couldn't work anymore. Naomi approached slowly, letting Ruthie smell her hand. Then she ran her hands down the bad leg, feeling, pressing gently. Old break? Yeah. Is that badly? I did my best. I'm not criticizing. She kept examining. She's compensating with her shoulder. That's causing strain. See how she stands? Coulter did now that Naomi pointed it out. Can we fix it? Not the leg, but we can ease the compensation. She straightened. I'll need cloth for wrapping, warm water, and some of that liniment I saw in the tack room. For the next hour, Coulter watched his new wife work with Ruthie. She wrapped the leg, massaged the shoulder, spoke in low tones that seemed to calm the mare more than any words should. By the end, Ruthie was standing easier. "We'll do this daily," Naomi said. "She'll never be sound, but she doesn't have to hurt." "Where'd you learn this?" "My father." Something crossed her face. "He had a gift with horses. Said I inherited it." He was right. That afternoon, while Naomi finished the barn roof, Coulter rode out to check fence lines in the high pasture. The work took longer than expected. When he got back, the sun was setting and Naomi was in the stable cleaning stalls. She'd already fed all the horses. "You didn't have to do that," he said. I was here. They were hungry." She kept shoveling. The black gelding's favoring his left rear. Might want to check his hoof. Coulter found the gelding, picked up the hoof, found a small stone wedged in the frog. He removed it, wondering how long it had been there. How had he missed it? "Thank you," he said. Naomi just nodded, kept working. That became their pattern. Work from sunrise until dark, dinner, exhausted silence, separate beds. They moved around each other like two people sharing a workshop, coordinating without discussing, finding rhythm without intimacy. A week passed. Then 2. The work was endless. But with Naomi helping, Coulter started to catch up on things he'd been putting off for years. The barn roof got finished, fences got mended, the vegetable garden that had gone to seed got cleared and replanted. Naomi's doing, though she never asked permission, just started doing it. They still barely talked, but Coulter started noticing things. The way Naomi's face relaxed when she worked with the horses. The small humming sound she made when she was concentrating. How she always poured his coffee first in the morning, even though she woke up before him. Small things. Things that made the cabin feel less empty. 3 weeks after the wedding, they had their first real argument. Coulter came back from town with supplies to find Naomi in the corral, working with a young stallion named Bravo. The horse was barely broke, temperamental, and Coulter had been planning to sell him because he didn't have time to train him properly. "Get out of there," Coulter said sharply. Naomi ignored him, kept her attention on the horse. "Naomi, now." She finally looked at him. "He's scared, not mean. There's a difference. He's dangerous. Only if you treat him like he is." She turned back to Bravo, took a step closer. The horse's ears flicked back, but he didn't bolt. "He's been handled rough. Someone hit him." "How do you know that?" "The way he flinches, see?" She raised her hand slowly and Bravo jerked back. "That's not natural fear. That's learned." "Doesn't matter. Get out before you get hurt." "I'm not getting hurt." "Naomi." "Mr. Hayes." She finally looked at him fully. "I appreciate your concern, but I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" The question hung there. "You think because I'm fat, I'm clumsy," she said quietly. "That I can't move fast or read an animal's intention." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." She walked toward him, and Bravo followed, calm now. "I've been working with horses since I was 8. I've dealt with stallions meaner and bigger than this one. My size doesn't make me incompetent." Coulter felt shame crawl up his spine. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He didn't have a good answer. Naomi brushed past him, heading toward the barn. Bravo followed her like a puppy. That night, dinner was silent and cold. Coulter tried to apologize twice. Both times, Naomi cut him off with, "It's fine." It clearly wasn't fine. He lay in the loft that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like an idiot. She was right. He'd assumed she couldn't handle Bravo because of her size, and that was exactly the kind of judgment he'd watched other people make about her, the kind he'd told himself he wouldn't make. The next morning, he found her already in the stable. "I was wrong," he said. She kept brushing the mare. "I shouldn't have assumed, and I shouldn't have talked to you like that." "No," she said quietly. "You shouldn't have. It won't happen again." She finally looked at him. "Won't it? What's that mean?" "It means you still see me the way everyone else does. Maybe you're kinder about it, but you look at me and see my size before you see anything else." "That's not true, isn't it?" She set down the brush. "You sleep in the loft, Coulter. We've been married almost a month and you won't even share a room with me. That's not about respect or patience. That's about you not wanting to be near me." The accusation hit like a punch. "That's not..." He stopped, tried again. It's complicated. It's really not. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed hurt. You don't want me. I understand, but don't pretend it's something noble. She walked past him toward the cabin. Coulter stood there, feeling the weight of words he didn't know how to say. That afternoon, Vernon Kirkland rode up to the ranch. Coulter saw him coming from the high pasture and felt dread settle in his stomach. Vernon never visited without a reason, and the reasons were never good. Coulter. Vernon dismounted. Need a word. About? Your wife. What about her? Vernon glanced toward the cabin, lowered his voice. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. People are talking, and it's not good talk. People always talk. This is different. They're saying well, they're wondering if maybe you bit off more than you can chew, bringing someone like that up here. It reflects on all of us. Coulter felt his hands curl into fists. Someone like what? You know what I mean. Say it. Vernon shifted uncomfortably. She's a big woman, Coulter, and people wonder if maybe you weren't thinking straight when you sent for her. If maybe you're regretting it now. Get off my land. I'm trying to help. You're trying to spread gossip. Now get out before I throw you out. Vernon's face hardened. Fine. But don't come crying when winter hits and you realize you made a mistake. Some of us tried to warn you. He rode off. Coulter stood there shaking with anger until Naomi emerged from the barn. What did he want? Nothing important. Coulter. He looked at her. At this woman who'd traveled 800 miles to help him save a ranch, who'd worked harder in a month than most people worked in a year, who'd asked for nothing except basic respect. He thinks I made a mistake marrying you, Coulter said quietly. And what do you think? The question hung between them like smoke. I think, Coulter said carefully, that I don't know how to do this. Do what? Any of it. Marriage, partnership, trusting someone. He gestured helplessly. I've been alone too long. I don't know how to let someone in. Is that what the loft is about? Yes. Not because you don't want me? No. The word came out rougher than he intended. That's not it at all. Then what is it? He couldn't say it. Couldn't explain that he'd watched people die. His parents in a winter sickness, his brother in a riding accident, his first love to a fever that took her in 3 days. That he'd learned not to hold on too tight to anything because loss was inevitable in this place. But Naomi was watching him with those hazel eyes, waiting. I'm afraid, he said finally. Of what? That if I let myself care about you, something will take you away. The words settled between them, honest and raw. Naomi stepped closer. Coulter, we live on a mountain. Either of us could die tomorrow from 100 different things. That's the life we chose. I know. So you can spend whatever time we have being afraid, or you can spend it being married. She walked back to the barn, leaving him standing there with the truth he'd been avoiding. That night, Coulter didn't go to the loft. He stood outside the bedroom door for 5 minutes, gathering courage, before finally knocking. Come in, Naomi said. She was sitting on the bed in her nightgown, brushing her hair. The lamp cast soft light across the room. I thought, Coulter started, then stopped. Would it be all right if I slept here tonight? She set down the brush. It's your bed, too. I know, but, Coulter, either come in or don't. But stop apologizing for existing in your own house. He came in. They lay in the dark, careful not to touch, the space between them feeling wider than the mattress. Thank you, Naomi said quietly. For what? For telling me the truth. About being afraid. Most people think fear's a weakness. Most people are idiots. She shifted slightly. My uncle used to beat me. That's why I left. The confession landed like a rock in still water. Naomi, I don't need sympathy. Just wanted you to know. You said you're afraid of loss. I'm afraid of traps, of places I can't leave. That's why I needed the truth about the loft. I needed to know you weren't keeping me at a distance because I was stuck here. You're not stuck. Yes, I am, but it's different when it's my choice. Coulter turned to look at her in the darkness. It'll always be your choice. You want to leave? I'll take you to town myself. Get you on a stage to wherever you want to go. I don't want to go anywhere. Why not? Because for the first time in my life, I'm somewhere nobody's hitting me or judging me or telling me I'm not good enough. She turned toward him. You might be afraid and stubborn and terrible at conversation, but you've never once made me feel small. You're not small. That's not what I meant. He knew what she meant. Can I hold your hand? He asked. Yes. Her hand was warm, calloused from work. Solid. They fell asleep like that, connected by that small bridge. September bled into October. The aspen leaves turned gold, then fell, leaving the mountains bare. The first snow came early, a light dusting that melted by noon but served as a warning. Winter was coming. Coulter and Naomi worked frantically to prepare, cutting firewood, storing hay, moving the cattle to lower pastures. They worked in rhythm now, anticipating each other's movements, communicating in glances and small gestures. At night they shared the bed. Some nights they just slept, exhausted. Other nights they talked in the darkness, small stories about their pasts, careful revelations. Coulter told her about his brother dying. Naomi told him about her mother leaving when she was young. Neither pushed for more than the other was ready to give. One morning in late October, Coulter woke to find Naomi already up, standing at the window. Snow, she said. He looked. The mountains were white, proper white this time, the snow that wouldn't melt. It's early, he said. Is that bad? Could be. He pulled on his boots. We need to get the rest of the herd down today. If another storm comes, they'll be trapped in the high country. They rode out together, Naomi on a steady mare named Belle, Coulter on his gelding. The cattle were scattered across the upper meadow, grazing on what was left of the grass. Rounding them up took hours. The animals were stubborn, didn't want to leave their grazing. By the time they got the last one moving toward lower ground, the sun was dropping and the temperature with it. We should hurry, Coulter said. They were halfway down when he noticed the young stallion, Bravo, was missing. Naomi, did you see Bravo come down? She scanned the hillside. No. Damn it, Coulter pulled up. He must have spooked, headed higher. I'll find him. No, you get the herd down. I'll go back. Coulter? That's not a discussion. Get them home safe. He turned his horse before she could argue, heading back up the mountain. The sun was nearly gone when he found Bravo. The stallion was in a narrow ravine trapped by rocks on 3 sides and fear on the 4th. He was wild-eyed, breathing hard. Easy, Coulter said, dismounting. Easy, boy. Bravo bolted, but there was nowhere to go. He ran into a rock wall, panicked, reared. Coulter approached carefully, speaking low. It took 20 minutes to calm him enough to get a lead rope on, and by then the light was gone and the temperature was dropping fast. He started leading Bravo out of the ravine when the first flakes began to fall. Not the light, lazy snow of earlier. Real snow. Heavy and fast, driven by wind that came out of nowhere. Within minutes, visibility dropped to nothing. Coulter pulled his coat tighter, tried to orient himself. He knew these mountains, knew every ridge and valley. But in a whiteout, landmarks disappeared. Up looked like down, left looked like right. He kept moving, hoping he was heading toward home. The wind got worse. The snow got heavier. And Coulter realized with a cold certainty that had nothing to do with the temperature that he was lost. He tried to find shelter, but there was nothing. Just open ground and wind and snow that erased everything. His horse stumbled. Bravo pulled against the lead rope, scared. Coulter's hands were numb. His face felt like ice. He thought about Naomi alone in the cabin, waiting. He thought about dying out here, frozen, his body not found until spring. He thought about a lot of things as the cold seeped deeper and his movements got slower. Then, through the screaming wind, he heard something. A voice, calling his name. He thought he was imagining it, hallucinating from cold. But it came again, closer. Coulter! A shape appeared in the white, a person moving toward him connected to a rope that disappeared into the storm. Naomi. She tied a line from the cabin and walked into the blizzard. Can you move? She shouted over the wind. He tried to answer, but his jaw was too frozen. She grabbed his arm, took Bravo's lead. Follow the rope, don't let go. They moved through the storm, Naomi leading, the rope their only guide. Coulter's legs barely worked. Everything was numb. But Naomi pulled him forward, step by step, until shapes emerged from the white. The barn. The cabin. Home. She got him inside, got the horses in the barn, then came back and started stripping off his frozen clothes. "I'm fine," he tried to say. "Shut up." She wrapped him in blankets, built up the fire, heated water. Gradually, feeling returned. Painful, burning feeling in his hands and feet. Naomi sat next to him, her own clothes soaked from the storm. "You could have died," she said quietly. "How did you know where I was?" "I didn't. I just kept walking until I found you. You could have gotten lost. I had the rope." "Naomi, don't." She looked at him, and her eyes were fierce. "Don't tell me I shouldn't have come. Don't tell me it was too dangerous. You're my husband, Coulter. What was I supposed to do? Sit here and wait for you to freeze?" He reached for her hand. "Thank you. You're welcome." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something between them shifted. That night, after they'd both warmed up and changed into dry clothes, after they'd checked on the horses and confirmed the cabin would hold against the wind, they lay in bed listening to the storm. "I was terrified," Coulter admitted, "out there when I realized I was lost. Not of dying, of leaving you alone." "I was terrified too," Naomi said, "that I wouldn't find you in time." "Why did you risk it?" She turned to face him. "Because somewhere in the last 2 months, you stopped being a stranger, and I couldn't stand the thought of losing you." He kissed her then, for the first time since their awkward wedding day. She kissed him back, and for the first time since this started, Coulter let himself believe that maybe this marriage could be something more than survival. Maybe it could be real. The storm lasted 3 days. They spent it in the cabin, keeping the fire going, caring for the animals in brief trips to the barn, and learning each other in the spaces between. When the storm finally broke and the sun emerged, the world was buried in white. They stood together at the cabin door, looking at the transformed landscape. "Beautiful," Naomi said. "Deadly," Coulter corrected. "Both." She was right. The mountains were always both. They spent the next week digging out, checking on livestock, repairing damage. 2 cattle had died in the storm. The rest had survived, huddled together for warmth. Bravo, the young stallion Coulter had nearly died retrieving, had come through fine. "Was he worth it?" Naomi asked, watching Bravo in the corral. Coulter thought about it, about being lost in the white, about Naomi walking into the storm to find him. "Yeah," he said. He was, because it wasn't really about the horse. It was about the fact that he'd gone back, that he'd taken the risk, that he was finally letting himself care about more than just survival. That night, Vernon Kirkland's prediction echoed in his mind. "Don't come crying when winter hits and you realize you made a mistake." Coulter looked at Naomi, asleep beside him, her face peaceful in the lamplight. No, he thought. The only mistake would have been staying alone. Winter settled over the ranch like a hand closing into a fist. The early storm had been a warning shot. What came after was the real siege. By mid-November, snow stood 3 feet deep in the meadow and twice that in the drifts against the barn. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the cabin within minutes of being poured. Coulter and Naomi developed routines born of necessity, checking livestock every 4 hours, breaking ice in the water troughs, hauling hay through snow that fought every step. The work was brutal, endless, but they did it together. One morning, Coulter woke to find Naomi's side of the bed empty. He found her in the barn, sitting in Ruthie's stall, the mare's head in her lap. "What's wrong?" he asked. "She's sick." Naomi's voice was tight. "Feel her." Coulter pressed his hand against Ruthie's neck. The mare was burning up. "How long?" "I noticed last night. Thought maybe she was just cold, but it's gotten worse." They spent the day trying everything. Blankets, warm mash, the few medicines Coulter had on hand. Nothing worked. By evening, Ruthie was struggling to breathe, her eyes glazed with pain. "We should put her down," Coulter said quietly. "No." "Naomi, I said no." She looked up at him, and he saw tears tracking down her face. "Not yet. Please." So they stayed with Ruthie through the night, Naomi talking to her, stroking her neck, refusing to give up. Coulter sat beside them, watching his wife fight for a horse that was already gone. Ruthie died just before dawn. Naomi didn't make a sound. She just kept stroking the mare's mane, even after the breathing stopped. "I'm sorry," Coulter said. "She was the first one who trusted me here." Naomi's voice cracked. When I got off that stagecoach and everyone looked at me like I was a mistake, Ruthie didn't care. She just wanted someone who'd be gentle with her. Coulter put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, finally letting herself cry. They buried Ruthie that afternoon in ground so frozen they had to use a pickaxe to break through. It took 3 hours. When they were done, Naomi stood at the grave for a long time, not speaking. "She mattered," she said finally. "I know. I need you to know that. She wasn't just livestock. She mattered." "I know," Coulter repeated. And he did. The loss of Ruthie shifted something in Naomi. She got quieter, harder. She threw herself into work with an intensity that worried Coulter, like she was trying to outrun grief. A week after Ruthie died, they rode down to Lewiston for supplies. The trip took twice as long as usual because of the snow, and by the time they reached town, both of them were half frozen. Vernon Kirkland was the first person they saw. "Well, well," Vernon stepped out of the general store, his eyes sliding over Naomi with poorly concealed disdain. "Surprised you two are still together. Heard about your little blizzard adventure, Coulter. That mare of yours find you, or did she get lost too?" Naomi's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. "My wife found me," Coulter said evenly. "Saved my life." "That's so." Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. Funny how desperate times make people seem heroic. Winter's long, though. Lots of time for regrets to settle in. "You got something to say, Vernon?" "Just making conversation." Vernon glanced at Naomi again. "Though I will say, some folks in town are taking bets on how long this arrangement lasts. Most money's on spring thaw. Figure once the stage can run regular again." "Finish that sentence and we're going to have a problem," Coulter said quietly. Vernon raised his hands in mock surrender. "No offense meant. Just reporting what people are saying. Then tell people to mind their own business." Inside the store, Naomi was silent while they gathered supplies. Flour, coffee, salt, a few precious vegetables that had survived in the cold cellar. The storekeeper's wife served them with a pinched expression, like touching their money might somehow contaminate her. "Anything else?" the woman asked, her tone suggesting they'd already taken too much of her time. "That's all," Naomi said. "Well, I hope you survived the winter up there. Must be hard being so isolated. So far from civilization." The word hung in the air like an insult. Coulter paid, grabbed the supplies, and got out before he said something he'd regret. Outside, loading the wagon, Naomi finally spoke. "They think I'm going to leave. They don't know anything. Vernon said people are betting on it. That means they've discussed it. Probably over dinner, over drinks, everywhere we're not." She climbed onto the wagon seat. "They think I'm a joke, Coulter. Your mail order mistake." "I don't care what they think." "Well, I do." She looked at him, her face hard. "Because every time we come to town, I have to see it in their faces. The judgment, the pity for you saddled with someone like me, the contempt for me for being too stupid or desperate to know better." "Naomi, don't." She cut him off. "Don't tell me to ignore it. Don't tell me it doesn't matter. It matters to me." They rode home in silence. That night, lying in bed, Coulter tried to find words that might help. "When I was 20, he said into the darkness, "I was engaged. Her name was Sarah Kemp. Beautiful girl. Everyone approved. Perfect match." Naomi didn't respond, but he knew she was listening. "Week before the wedding, she got sick, fever. It took her in 3 days. He paused. "Town was devastated. So many people loved her. The funeral was packed." "I'm sorry," Naomi said quietly. "After she died, I kept thinking about all those people who'd approved of us, who thought we were perfect together, and I realized something." He turned toward her. "Their approval didn't make her less dead. Didn't make me less alone. Other people's opinions about my life didn't actually affect my life at all." "That's different." "How?" "Because Sarah died. She didn't choose to leave you. People weren't judging whether you deserved her." "Yes, they were." Coulter's voice was flat. "After she died, half the town said I should have gotten the doctor sooner. Said I'd failed her. The other half said it was probably for the best, that I wasn't ready to be a husband anyway. People always have opinions, Naomi. The question is whether you let them matter." She was quiet for a long time. "I left Pennsylvania because my uncle beat me," she said finally. "But that's not the whole truth. He beat me because I embarrassed him. because I was fat and unmarried at 26, and people in town talked about it, about what a burden I was, how shameful it must be for him, having a niece who looked like me. That's not your fault? I know that. Logically, I know that. She shifted in the darkness. But there's a difference between knowing something and believing it. And sometimes, when I see how people here look at me, I start thinking maybe my uncle was right. Maybe I am too much, too big, too visible, too... Stop. Coulter reached for her hand. Whatever your uncle told you, it was a lie. You're not too much of anything. You're exactly enough. You have to say that. You married me. I married you because you were the only person who answered my ad with actual qualifications instead of desperation. I married you because your letter was smart and practical and didn't waste time on nonsense. He squeezed her hand. I stay married to you because you work harder than anyone I've ever met, because you saved my life in a blizzard, because you make this place feel less empty. Coulter, and because Vernon Kirkland is an idiot who peaked in his 20s and has spent the last 20 years resenting everyone who didn't. That surprised a small laugh out of her. I mean it, Coulter said. He runs a store in a town of 200 people and acts like he's mayor of Denver. His opinion isn't worth the breath he wastes sharing it. Naomi was quiet again, but this time it felt different, less heavy. Thank you, she said finally. For what? For being angry on my behalf. My whole life, people either agreed with the ones who judged me or told me to ignore it. Nobody ever just got angry about it. Well, I am angry. You're my wife. And if people have a problem with that, they can take it up with me. She rolled over, kissed him softly. I love you. The words hit him like a physical thing. He'd known, somewhere in the back of his mind, that feelings had been building, but hearing her say it out loud was different. You don't have to say it back, Naomi added quickly. I just wanted you to know. I love you too, he said, and realized it was true. Had been true for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it. You just did. They made love that night, for the first time since the wedding. It was awkward at first, two people still learning each other's bodies, still figuring out what worked, but it was also real and honest and theirs. Afterward, lying tangled together, Coulter felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. December brought more snow and colder temperatures. The ranch became a small island in a white ocean, cut off from everything. They went 2 weeks without seeing another human being. It should have felt isolating. Instead, it felt like freedom. Without the weight of town judgment, without Vernon's smirks or the storekeeper's wife's pinched expressions, Naomi seemed to relax. She laughed more, talked more, let herself take up space without apologizing for it. One evening, while Coulter was repairing a broken harness, Naomi started singing while she cooked. Nothing fancy, just an old folk song her mother used to sing. Her voice was deeper than he'd expected, rich and steady. Didn't know you could sing, he said. She glanced over, looking almost embarrassed. I used to, before. Before what? Before my uncle told me I was too loud, that ladies shouldn't draw attention to themselves. She stirred the pot. Especially ladies who already drew enough attention just by existing. Your uncle was an idiot. Yes, he was. She smiled slightly. But he was the only family I had, so I listened, stopped singing, stopped doing a lot of things. You should start again. Maybe I will. She did. Over the next few weeks, the cabin filled with her voice. Sometimes hymns, sometimes work songs, sometimes melodies she made up as she went along. Coulter found himself looking forward to it, the way her singing made the small space feel bigger somehow. Christmas arrived without ceremony. They'd both agreed not to make a fuss. Supplies were limited and survival took priority over celebration. But on Christmas morning, Coulter woke to find Naomi had made a small wreath from pine branches and hung it on the door. I know we said no gifts, she said when she caught him looking at it. But it felt wrong not to mark the day somehow. It's nice? Liar. It looks like something a child made. It does, he admitted. But I like it anyway. That afternoon, he gave her his gift. A new pair of work gloves lined with rabbit fur he'd trapped and tanned himself. They're not much, he said. She slipped them on, flexing her fingers. They're perfect. Your hands are always cold, I noticed. You noticed. She said it like it meant something. Yeah. She kissed him then, soft and quick. Thank you. They spent Christmas Day doing chores and playing cards by the fire. It was simple, quiet, nothing special. It was the best Christmas Coulter had ever had. The calm couldn't last. In early January, one of the neighbors, a rancher named Tom Bidwell, who lived 5 miles south, showed up at their door looking grim. Lost 20 head in the last storm, Tom said, accepting the coffee Naomi offered. Can't afford that kind of loss. I'm selling out, moving to Denver. Selling to who? Coulter asked. Arthur Granger. Coulter felt his stomach drop. Arthur Granger was a land speculator from back east who'd been buying up failed ranches for the last 2 years, consolidating them into one massive holding. He had money and political connections, and he played dirty. That's a mistake, Tom. Maybe. But it's the only option I got. Tom looked at Coulter. He's going to make you an offer, too. Probably already planning it. I'm not selling. That's what I said. Then I lost 20 head. Tom set down his cup. Just watch yourself, Coulter. Granger doesn't take no for an answer. After Tom left, Naomi looked at Coulter. What does that mean? He doesn't take no? Means he finds ways to make you change your mind. Like what? Accidents, fences that mysteriously get cut, livestock that wander off. Nothing you can prove, but enough to make you bleed money until selling seems like the smart choice. That's criminal. It's business, at least according to Granger. Naomi's expression hardened. Then we need to be ready. They were ready, but Granger was patient. Nothing happened in January or February, just winter grinding on, cold and relentless. They lost 3 more cattle to the cold, normal losses for a hard winter. The hay held out. The woodpile stayed ahead of demand. By March, Coulter started to think maybe Tom had been wrong. Maybe Granger wasn't interested. Then the fence came down. Coulter found it on a routine check of the northern boundary. 20 feet of fence posts knocked over, wire cut clean through, and 30 head of cattle gone. Storm? Naomi asked when he came back to report it. Storms don't cut wire. Her face went pale. Granger? Probably. Coulter was already grabbing his rifle. I'm going to track them. I'm coming with you. Naomi? Don't. She grabbed her own coat. We do this together. The trail wasn't hard to follow. 30 cattle left deep tracks in the snow, and whoever took them wasn't trying to hide their route. They headed west toward Granger's land. They found the cattle 5 miles out, penned in a makeshift corral on what was technically open range, but everyone knew belonged to Granger. 3 of Granger's men were there. One Coulter recognized, a hired gun named Dutch Keller, who had a reputation for being quick with a pistol and slow with a conscience. Those are my cattle, Coulter said. Dutch looked up lazily. Don't see your brand on this fence. You cut my fence, drove them here. That's a serious accusation. You got proof? Coulter felt rage building in his chest. Let them go, now. Can't do that. Mr. Granger found these cattle wandering on open range. That makes them his until someone proves ownership. Dutch smiled. You got papers? Bill of sale, maybe. You know damn well I don't carry papers when I'm checking fence line. Then I guess we got a problem. Coulter felt Naomi's hand on his arm, squeezing tight. A warning. Fine, Coulter said through clenched teeth. I'll get the papers, but those cattle better be here when I come back. Oh, they'll be here, assuming they really are yours. The ride back to the ranch took an hour. Coulter spent it silently furious while Naomi tried to think strategically. We can't prove they cut the fence, she said. I know. And even if we get the cattle back, they'll just do it again. I know that too. So what do we do? Coulter didn't answer, because he didn't know. Back at the ranch, he dug out the ownership papers, certificates proving he'd bought or bred each animal. Then they rode back to the corral. The cattle were gone. So were Dutch and his men. Son of a... Coulter dismounted, looking for tracks. Found them heading deeper into Granger's territory. They're baiting you, Naomi said. They want you to follow, to cross onto Granger's land so they can claim you're trespassing, maybe shoot you for it. She was right. Coulter knew she was right. But 30 head represented a significant portion of their herd. Losing them meant a harder year ahead, maybe an impossible one. We can't just let them go, he said. We're not. Naomi's voice was firm. But we're not getting ourselves killed either. We're going to town. We're filing a complaint with the sheriff. The sheriff won't do anything. Granger owns him. Maybe. But at least it'll be on record. And maybe, if we're lucky, there's still some law left in this territory. They rode to Lewiston. The sheriff was a tired-looking man named Jack Porter, who listened to their story with the expression of someone who'd heard it before and knew how it ended. "I'll look into it," he said in a tone that meant he wouldn't. "That's it?" Coulter demanded. "He stole 30 head and you'll look into it?" "I'll ride out to Granger's place, ask some questions, but unless you got witnesses or proof beyond your word against his, 'We have cut fence wire,' which could have been cut by anyone, including you, trying to frame Granger." The sheriff held up a hand before Coulter could explode. "I'm not saying you did. I'm saying that's what Granger's lawyer will argue. And his lawyer's better than anything you can afford. So he just gets away with it." "I didn't say that. I said I'll look into it." The sheriff's expression softened slightly. "Look, Coulter, I know this ain't fair, but Granger's got money and connections. He's going to keep pushing until he gets what he wants. Might be easier to just sell to him, take the money, start over somewhere else. This is my land, and it'll be your grave if you're not careful. Think about your wife. She deserved to be widowed because you're too stubborn to know when you're beat." Outside the sheriff's office, Naomi grabbed Coulter's arm before he could storm back in. "He's not worth it," she said. "He just told us to roll over and take it." "I know, but getting arrested for assaulting a sheriff won't help us get our cattle back." Coulter forced himself to breathe, to think. "We need help," he said finally. "From who?" "I don't know yet." They spent that night in Lewiston's boarding house, a luxury they couldn't afford but took anyway because the ride back to the ranch in the dark seemed impossible after everything. In the small, cold room, lying on a bed that wasn't theirs, Naomi finally let her composure crack. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. What if we can't win this? What if Granger just keeps coming until there's nothing left? Then we lose." Coulter pulled her close. "But we don't quit. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah, quitting means giving up. Losing means you fought and it wasn't enough. I can live with losing. Can't live with quitting." She was quiet for a moment. "What if fighting gets you killed?" "Then at least I went down for something that mattered." "That's not comforting, Coulter." "I know." Kissed her forehead. "But it's the truth." The next morning, they rode back to the ranch to find another section of fence down and 5 more cattle missing. Naomi didn't say anything, just looked at the damage, then at Coulter. "We fix it," he said, "and when they knock it down again, we fix it again." They spent 2 days repairing the fence. The work was brutal, digging post holes in ground that was still half frozen, stretching new wire, reinforcing the weak points. Every minute, Coulter expected to see Granger's men coming back to finish the job. But nobody came. That somehow felt worse, like they weren't even worth the effort of confrontation. On the 3rd day, a visitor arrived. Not Granger or his men. A woman. Middle-aged, well-dressed, riding a decent horse with the confidence of someone who knew how to handle herself in rough country. "Mrs. Hayes?" she called out. Naomi came out of the cabin, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes? My name is Margaret Keating. I own the ranch 15 miles northeast of here." She dismounted. "I heard about your trouble with Granger. Thought we should talk." Over coffee, Margaret laid it out. "Granger's been targeting small operations for 2 years. He's bought out 6 ranches, stolen livestock from 4 more, and burned down 2 barns that I know of." She sipped her coffee. "Sheriff won't do anything because Granger pays him not to. Federal marshals won't come out for what they call local disputes. We're on our own." "So what do we do?" Naomi asked. "We band together. There are 8 ranches left that haven't sold. If we coordinate our efforts, watch each other's land, share information, we might be able to hold out. Or we might just make him angry enough to come at all of us at once," Coulter said. "Possibly, but right now he's picking us off one by one. Together, we're harder to break." It wasn't a great plan, but it was something. Over the next 2 weeks, Coulter met with the other ranchers. They set up a rotation, 2 people riding fence lines every day, checking for damage or missing livestock. They shared supplies and information. When Granger's men showed up at one ranch, riders from the others would appear within hours. It wasn't enough to stop Granger, but it slowed him down. The harassment continued through March and into April. Fences cut, cattle stolen, wells poisoned with dead animals. Granger was systematic, relentless, but the ranchers held. Then, in mid-April, everything changed. A rider came to the ranch at dawn, barely staying on his exhausted horse. "Fire," he gasped. "Keating Ranch. They're burning her out." Coulter and Naomi rode hard, arriving to find Margaret's barn fully engulfed, flames reaching into the sky. Margaret and her hands were fighting it with buckets, but it was hopeless. "Where's Granger's men?" Coulter shouted over the roar. "Gone! They lit it and rode off." Margaret's face was streaked with soot and tears. "They took my horses first, locked them in the barn, then set it on fire. I got most out, but—" She broke off, unable to finish. Naomi was already moving toward the barn. "How many's still inside?" "2, but you can't—" Naomi didn't wait. She grabbed a wet blanket, wrapped it around herself, and ran into the burning building. "Naomi!" Coulter started after her, but the heat drove him back. 30 seconds later, she emerged, leading a terrified mare, its coat singed but alive. "One more," she gasped, and went back in. This time she was gone longer. The barn was collapsing, timbers crashing down. Coulter was about to go in after her when she appeared, half carrying a young gelding that could barely walk. She got it clear just as the roof came down. The gelding collapsed in the yard, its breathing labored. Naomi collapsed next to it, coughing violently. Margaret knelt beside her. "You saved them. You saved my horses." Naomi couldn't answer, just kept coughing, her face black with soot. Coulter helped her to her feet, checked her over. Burns on her hands and arms, smoke damage to her lungs. But alive. "You could have died," he said roughly. "They were trapped," she managed. "I couldn't just let them burn." That night, back at their own ranch, Coulter watched Naomi sleep. She'd refused to stay at Margaret's, insisted on riding home despite her injuries. She was stubborn, reckless, and braver than anyone he'd ever known. And Granger had just made this personal in a way that couldn't be undone. The next morning, Coulter rode to every ranch in the Alliance. By afternoon, 8 angry ranchers sat around his table. "This ends now," he said. Margaret Keating spoke first, her voice still raw from smoke. "How do you propose we end it? Granger has money men and the sheriff in his pocket. We've got determination and not much else." "We've got the law on our side," Coulter said, "even if the local law won't enforce it." Tom Bidwell, who'd ridden back from Denver when he heard about the fire, shook his head. "Federal marshals won't come out here for property disputes. I already tried." "Then we go higher." Coulter spread a hand-drawn map across the table. "Territorial governors in Cheyenne, 3 days' ride. We bring him evidence of what Granger's doing, theft, arson, intimidation. Make enough noise that he can't ignore it." "And you think he'll care?" This from James Rutherford, who ran cattle on the eastern slopes. "Politicians protect their own. Granger probably has connections there too." "Maybe, but doing nothing guarantees we lose. At least this gives us a chance." The room fell silent. These were practical people who understood odds, and the odds weren't good. Naomi cleared her throat. Every head turned toward her. She still looked rough, bandages on her hands, voice hoarse, but her eyes were clear. "I know most of you don't know me well," she said. "Some of you probably wondered why Coulter married someone like me. Mail-order bride, too fat to be useful, probably more burden than help." A few faces flushed with embarrassment. "I thought that too at first," Naomi continued. "Thought maybe I'd made a mistake coming here, that I didn't belong in this hard place with these hard people." She looked around the table. "But yesterday when I ran into that burning barn, I wasn't thinking about whether I belonged or whether I was good enough. I was thinking about those horses trapped inside, about how sometimes you do the thing that needs doing, even when it's terrifying." She paused, meeting each person's eyes. "Granger wants us afraid. He wants us to feel small and powerless. And maybe we are small compared to his money and influence. But we're here. We're still standing. And if we ride to Cheyenne together, if we make our voices heard, maybe that's enough. Maybe being brave enough to try is what matters." Tom Bidwell was the first to nod. Then Margaret. Then, one by one, the others. "I'm in," Tom said. "Already lost my ranch once. Won't let him take anyone else's." "When do we leave?" Margaret asked. Coulter looked at the map. "Tomorrow at first light. We ride hard. We can be there in 3 days. Present our case to the governor. Get back here before Granger realizes we're gone." "He'll realize," James said. "Question is what he does about it." Let him do what he wants, Coulter said. We're done running scared. That night, after the others had left, Naomi sat at the table rewrapping her burned hands. Coulter watched her work, the careful way she handled the bandages. You didn't have to do that, he said. Which part? The barn or the speech? Both. Yes, I did. She winced as the cloth pulled against a blister. Those ranchers needed to hear that someone believes we can win, even if it's just a fat woman who doesn't know when to quit. Don't call yourself that. Why not? It's true. It's not all you are. She looked up at him. I know that, finally. Took running into a burning building to figure it out, but I know it now. She tied off the bandage. I'm tired of being afraid, Coulter. Afraid of what people think. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of taking up too much space. Yesterday in that barn, I wasn't afraid. I was just present. Doing what needed doing, and it felt right. It also almost got you killed. Almost doesn't count. She stood, walked over to him. You asked me once why I answered your advertisement. I said it was for survival and a second chance, but that wasn't the whole truth. What was? I wanted to matter. My whole life I'd been told I was too much or not enough, always the wrong size, the wrong shape, the wrong everything. I wanted to be somewhere that I could just be useful, where what I could do mattered more than what I looked like. She took his hand. This place gave me that. You gave me that. And I'm not going to let Granger take it away. Coulter pulled her close, careful of her injuries. We might lose anyway. I know, but at least we'll lose fighting. They left at dawn, 5 riders heading east toward Cheyenne. Coulter and Naomi, Margaret Keating, Tom Bidwell, and James Rutherford. The others stayed behind to watch the ranches, to make sure Granger didn't use their absence to strike. The ride was hard. Spring in Wyoming meant mud and unpredictable weather. They pushed through rain the first day, cold wind the second, slept rough, ate jerky and hardtack, kept moving. On the second night, camped in a grove of cottonwoods near the Laramie River, Margaret asked the question everyone had been thinking. What if the governor won't see us? Then we make him see us, Tom said. Camp on his doorstep if we have to. And if he sees us but doesn't care? Nobody had a good answer for that. Naomi, who'd been quiet most of the ride, spoke up. My uncle used to say that rich men only understand 2 languages, money and embarrassment. We can't hurt Granger's money, but we can embarrass him. How? James asked. Newspapers. Cheyenne has 3. Denver has more. If the governor won't act, we go to the press. Tell them about a wealthy land speculator terrorizing small ranchers, burning barns, stealing livestock. Make it a story. Make people care. Margaret nodded slowly. Public pressure. Might work. Might also make Granger come after us harder, Coulter pointed out. He's already coming after us as hard as he can, Naomi said. What's he going to do? Burn more barns? Steal more cattle? He's already doing that. At least this way people will know about it. They reached Cheyenne late on the 3rd day. The territorial capital was bigger than any of them except Tom had seen. Actual streets, brick buildings, more people in one place than seemed natural. They found a cheap boarding house, cleaned up as best they could, and the next morning presented themselves at the governor's office. The secretary was a thin man with spectacles who looked at them like they'd tracked mud onto his pristine floor. Do you have an appointment? He asked in a tone that suggested he knew the answer. No, Coulter said, but we need to see the governor. It's urgent. I'm sure it is. Unfortunately, Governor Thorne's schedule is quite full. Perhaps you could write a letter explaining your concerns. We rode 3 days to get here, Margaret cut in. We're not leaving without seeing him. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but the governor cannot simply tell him we have evidence of criminal activity by one of his major donors, Naomi said quietly. That got the secretary's attention. Excuse me? Arthur Granger. He's been stealing livestock, cutting fences, and burning property. We have documentation, witness statements, physical evidence. She leaned forward slightly. Tell the governor that if he's too busy to see us, we'll take our evidence to the Cheyenne leader instead. See what they make of it. The secretary's face went pale. Wait here. He disappeared into the back office, returned 5 minutes later looking flustered. Governor Thorne can spare 15 minutes. Follow me. Governor William Thorne was a large man with a politician's smile and a banker's eyes. He greeted them warmly, offered chairs, and listened with apparent interest as Coulter laid out their case. "Troubling allegations," Thorne said when Coulter finished. "Very troubling indeed. Do you have proof of these claims?" Coulter produced the documents they'd compiled: cut fence wire, ownership papers for stolen cattle, written statements from witnesses, photographs of Margaret's burned barn. Thorne examined them carefully. Too carefully. Like he was looking for reasons to dismiss them rather than reasons to act. "The thing is," Thorne said finally, "these are serious accusations against a prominent businessman. Mr. Granger has invested significant capital in developing Wyoming's ranching industry. He's created jobs, built infrastructure. He's a thief," Tom said flatly. "That's your perspective. Mr. Granger might argue he's simply consolidating failed operations into a more efficient enterprise." Thorne set down the papers. "I sympathize with your situation, truly, but my hands are tied without more concrete evidence. What you've shown me could be interpreted many ways: accidents, misunderstandings, natural business competition. He burned my barn with horses locked inside," Margaret said, her voice shaking with anger. "What part of that is natural business competition? Can you prove Mr. Granger ordered it, or did you actually see his men commit this act?" "We saw them right away." "After the fire started or before?" Margaret's jaw clenched. "After." "Then you can't definitively prove causation. For all you know, they were trying to help put it out and fled when it became too dangerous." Thorne spread his hands apologetically. "I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm saying a court would require more than circumstantial evidence to convict a man of Granger's standing." "So he just gets away with it," Coulter said. "I didn't say that. I'm saying you need better proof, clear documentation of wrongdoing. Perhaps you could hire a Pinkerton detective to—" "We can't afford Pinkertons," James interrupted. "We can barely afford to be here." "Then I'm afraid there's little I can do." Thorne stood, signaling the meeting was over. "I encourage you to work with your local sheriff." "The sheriff's bought," Tom said. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Thorne's expression hardened slightly. "Gentlemen, lady, I understand you're frustrated, but you're asking me to intervene in what appears to be a local property dispute based on incomplete evidence and accusations against law enforcement. Unless you can provide something more substantial, my answer must be no." Outside the governor's office, they stood in the street, defeated. "Well," James said after a long silence, "that went about as expected." "Corrupt bastard," Tom muttered. "Probably gets kickbacks from Granger, too." "Now what?" Margaret asked. Naomi looked at the newspaper office across the street. "Now we go to Plan B." The Cheyenne Leader's editor was a grizzled man named Henry Walsh, who listened to their story with the skepticism of someone who'd heard a lot of stories and believed few of them. "Let me get this straight," Walsh said, chewing on an unlit cigar. "You want me to print accusations against Arthur Granger, who, incidentally, advertises in this paper, based on evidence the governor himself wouldn't act on?" "Yes," Naomi said simply. "Do you have any idea what kind of libel suit that would open me up to?" "It's not libel if it's true. Truth is a defense in court. Doesn't mean I want to end up in court." Walsh leaned back in his chair. "Look, I sympathize. I've heard rumors about Granger's methods, but rumors don't make news. I need facts, corroboration, something solid." "We have witness statements," Coulter said, "from people with a financial interest in hurting Granger's reputation. Defense lawyers would tear that apart." Walsh shook his head. "Bring me something better, and maybe we can talk. But right now, you don't have a story. You have allegations." "What would make it a story?" Naomi asked. Walsh considered. "Get me someone with no stake in this. A neutral party who can verify what you're claiming. Or catch Granger's men in the act with witnesses who can't be discredited. Or," he paused, "get me Granger himself saying something incriminating, on record." "How would we do that?" "Hell if I know. I'm an editor, not an investigator." Walsh stood. "I'm sorry I can't help you, but I'm not risking my paper on a story I can't prove." They left Cheyenne the next morning, defeated and nearly broke. The ride back was quieter than the ride out. Nobody wanted to say what they were all thinking, that they'd failed, that Granger had won, that it was only a matter of time before he took everything. "We should have known," Tom said on the second day. "Systems rigged against people like us." "Don't," Naomi said sharply. "Don't what?" "Don't give up before we're actually beaten." "We are beaten. Governor won't help. Papers won't print the story. What's left? Granger himself, Naomi said. Everyone looked at her. Walsh said we need Granger saying something incriminating, on record, so we get that. How? Margaret asked. We make him an offer. Tell him we're ready to sell. Get him talking, get him confident. People like Granger love to brag when they think they've won. Maybe he says something we can use. He's not stupid enough to confess to crimes, James said. Maybe not confess, but maybe admit things that prove a pattern, imply things, give us leverage. Naomi looked around at the skeptical faces. It's better than nothing. Coulter studied his wife. Her burned hands were healing but still wrapped in bandages. She looked exhausted, beaten down by the hard ride and harder disappointment, but her eyes were still fighting. It's dangerous, he said. If Granger suspects we're trying to trap him, then we're no worse off than we already are. We could be dead. We could already be dead. He could burn our ranches tomorrow, and the sheriff would call it an accident. At least this way we're taking action, instead of just waiting for the end. The others were quiet, considering. Finally, Margaret spoke. I'm in. Naomi's right. Waiting for Granger to pick us off one by one is just dying slowly. I'd rather go down fighting. Me too, Tom said. James nodded. What the hell? Got nothing left to lose anyway. They got back to find 2 more fences cut and a dozen cattle missing. Granger hadn't waited for their return. He'd struck while they were gone, just like they'd feared. We need to move fast, Coulter said, before he knows we're back. That afternoon, he rode to Granger's ranch alone, carrying a white flag and a message. He wanted to discuss terms of sale. Granger's foreman, Dutch Keller, looked at him with barely concealed contempt. Boss has been waiting for you to come to your senses, Dutch said. He'll see you tomorrow, noon. Come alone. I'm bringing my wife. Boss said alone. My wife owns half the ranch. She's part of any deal. Coulter held Dutch's gaze. Those are my terms. He doesn't like them. Deal's off. Dutch considered, then shrugged. I'll tell him. But if he says no, then I guess we keep fighting. That night, lying in bed, Naomi asked the question Coulter had been dreading. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm sure about doing nothing. He rolled to face her. If it goes wrong, it won't. If it does, I need you to promise me something. Coulter, promise me you'll leave. Get on the first stage to anywhere and don't look back. I'm not leaving you. Naomi, I said I'm not leaving. Her voice was firm. We do this together or not at all. I didn't marry you to become a widow at the first sign of trouble. This isn't the first sign, it's the 10th or 20th sign, and it could get us killed. Then we die together. She touched his face. I know that sounds dramatic, probably sounds stupid, but I mean it. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. He wanted to argue, to make her promise to save herself if things went wrong. But looking at her in the lamplight, seeing the determination in her eyes, he knew it would be pointless. Together, he agreed. They arrived at Granger's ranch at noon. It was ostentatious in a way that felt wrong for Wyoming, a 2-story house with columns, manicured grounds, a fence that served no practical purpose except to announce ownership. Dutch met them at the gate. Boss is in his office. Follow me. Arthur Granger was a soft man with hard eyes. Late 50s, expensive suit, hands that had never done manual labor. He rose when they entered, all false warmth and politician's smile. Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, please sit. He gestured to chairs across from his massive desk. Can I offer you coffee? Something stronger? We're fine, Coulter said. Suit yourself. Granger settled into his chair. So, I understand you've reconsidered my previous offers. We're considering our options. Smart. Very smart. Granger pulled out a folder. I'm prepared to offer you $2,000 for your property. That's significantly more than it's worth, given the condition of your herd and infrastructure, but I'm feeling generous. Generous, Naomi repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Granger's smile didn't waver. I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Hayes. Your men cut our fences, stole our cattle. You burned Margaret Keating's barn. Those are serious accusations. Do you have proof? We know it was you. Knowing and proving are different things. Granger leaned back. Look, I understand you're upset. Ranching is hard. People lose livestock. Fences need constant repair. Accidents happen. But those aren't my responsibility. You're right, Naomi said, and Coulter felt his stomach drop. This wasn't the plan. Those accidents aren't your responsibility. They're strategic business moves. And honestly, they're brilliant. Granger raised an eyebrow. Oh? Buy up struggling ranches cheap, consolidate them, eliminate competition. It's smart, ruthless, but smart. My husband doesn't want to admit it, but I've been telling him for weeks, you've already won. Fighting is just prolonging the inevitable. Coulter forced himself not to react, trusted that Naomi knew what she was doing. Your wife is a perceptive woman, Granger said. She is, Coulter agreed, which is why I'm here. But $2,000 isn't enough. It's a fair price. Fair would be what the ranch is actually worth, which is closer to $5,000, and you know it. Coulter leaned forward. But I'm willing to negotiate. Here's what I want. $3,000 cash and you call off your men. Stop the harassment. Let us finish the season with what livestock we have left. Then we'll sell and clear out. Why would I agree to that? You just admitted I've already won, because we could still make trouble. Go to newspapers, write letters to the territorial governor, file lawsuits we can't afford, but that would tie you up for months. Coulter held Granger's gaze. Or you pay a little extra, we go quietly, and you get what you want without any mess. Granger considered this. The other ranchers, are they willing to sell too? Most of them, but they'll follow our lead. We sell, they'll sell. We fight, they'll fight with us. I see. Granger drummed his fingers on the desk. And if I agree to your terms, you'll convince the others to accept my offers? For fair prices? Yes. Fair prices? Granger smiled. You realize I could just keep doing what I've been doing. Bleed you all dry until you're begging to sell for whatever I offer. You could, Naomi said. But that takes time, and time is expensive. Winter's coming eventually. You want this wrapped up before then, don't you? Want the consolidation complete so you can maximize next year's profits. Granger studied her with new interest. You've thought about this. I think about everything, Mr. Granger. It's how someone like me survives in places that don't want me. Someone like you? A woman. A fat woman. Someone people underestimate. She smiled slightly. But underestimating people is a mistake, one I suspect you've made before. Something shifted in Granger's expression. A flicker of respect, maybe, or calculation. Tell me, Mrs. Hayes, if you're so business savvy, why are you selling? Why not fight me? Because I'm smart enough to know when I'm outmatched. You have money, influence, men who'll do whatever you tell them. We have pride and stubbornness. Those don't pay bills or replace stolen cattle. She paused. But I also know that people like you respect efficiency. You'd rather pay a little extra now than deal with months of headaches. So that's what we're offering. A clean, quiet exit. Granger was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. You're good. Almost had me convinced you actually want to sell. Coulter's hand moved toward his gun. Relax, Granger said. I'm not going to shoot you. I'm actually impressed. Coming here, pretending to negotiate, probably hoping I'd say something incriminating you could take to the authorities. It's clever. More clever than I expected from a mountain hermit and his mail-order wife. We're serious about selling, Coulter said. No, you're not. You rode all the way to Cheyenne to complain about me to the governor. Probably went to the newspapers, too. And when that didn't work, you came up with this scheme. Granger stood. I admire the effort. Really. But did you honestly think I wouldn't find out about your little trip? Naomi's face went pale. I have friends in Cheyenne, Ting, Granger continued. Friends who tell me when troublesome ranchers come asking questions. The governor's secretary, the newspaper editors, even a few Pinkertons who keep me informed about potential problems. He walked around the desk. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my property. You're going to go back to your sad little ranch. And eventually, maybe a month, maybe 3, you're going to accept that you can't win. And when you finally do sell to me, it'll be for whatever I feel like offering. Could be 1,000, could be 100, could be nothing at all except the privilege of leaving with your lives. You're threatening us, Coulter said. I'm stating facts. Granger opened the door. Dutch will show you out. In the yard as they mounted their horses, Dutch called out to them. Boss is usually right about these things. People always sell in the end. Easier if you just accept it now. Coulter didn't respond. just turned his horse toward home. They rode in silence for a mile before Naomi spoke. He knew. The whole time, he knew why we were really there. Yeah. So what now? Coulter didn't have an answer. Back at the ranch, they found the others waiting. Margaret, Tom, James, and 3 more ranchers who'd joined the alliance. How'd it go? Margaret asked. He knew, Naomi said, about Cheyenne, about everything. He was toying with us the whole time. The group absorbed this in grim silence. So that's it? James said. We're finished? Maybe, Coulter admitted, unless we can think of something he won't see coming. Like what? Tom asked. We've tried the law, tried the press, tried trapping him into a confession. What's left? Nobody had an answer. That night, a late spring storm rolled in. Not snow, but cold rain that turned the ground to mud and made everything miserable. Coulter stood at the window, watching it fall, thinking about Granger's smile and the certainty in his voice. People always sell in the end. Behind him, Naomi was sitting at the table, staring at nothing. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For dragging you into this. For not being able to protect what we built. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. She looked up at him. And we're not finished yet. Naomi, I mean it. Granger thinks he's won because he has money and connections, but he's missing something. What? He thinks we're fighting him the same way everyone else does, with law and publicity and negotiation. But those aren't our strengths. We're ranchers. We survive impossible winters and drought and every other thing this land throws at us. We're tougher than he thinks. Being tough doesn't stop bullets or fires. No, but it means we don't quit just because the odds are bad. She stood, walked to the window beside him. My whole life, people told me I couldn't do things because of how I looked, said I was too big, too awkward, too much. And every time, I proved them wrong by just refusing to believe them. Granger's doing the same thing, telling us we're too small to fight him, so we prove him wrong the same way. How? By being too stubborn to lose. Outside, lightning flashed across the mountains. Thunder rolled after it, deep and threatening. And Coulter realized his wife was right. They hadn't lost yet. Granger thought they had, which meant he'd get complacent, overconfident, and overconfident men made mistakes. What are you thinking? Naomi asked, seeing the change in his expression. I'm thinking we stop playing by rules that don't apply to us. Stop trying to beat Granger in courts and newspapers where he owns the game. Start beating him where we're stronger. Here, she said, understanding. On the land. Yeah. Here. The next morning, Coulter gathered the alliance again. We can't fight Granger's money or influence, he said, but we can make taking our ranches more expensive than it's worth. Starting now, we coordinate everything. Guard rotations 24 hours. Anyone sees Granger's men, we all respond. They cut one fence, we make them pay for it. Pay how? Tom asked. However we have to. Cut their fences, spook their herds, make noise in town about every shady thing they do. Be the thorn in his side he can't remove without getting bloody. Coulter looked around the table. It won't be legal, might not even be smart, but it'll show Granger we're not rolling over. That's not a strategy, James said. That's revenge. Call it what you want. I call it fighting back. Margaret spoke up. What about the sheriff? He catches us retaliating. He'll arrest us and ignore what Granger's doing, so we don't get caught. Coulter pulled out the map. We know this land better than Granger's hired men. We use that. Hit fast, disappear, make them paranoid about every shadow. The room was quiet as everyone considered this. Finally, Tom grinned. Hell, I'm in. Already lost everything once, might as well go down swinging. One by one, the others agreed. That night, while Granger's men slept, 3 miles of his fence came down. Cattle scattered across open range, mixing with other herds until sorting them would take days. When his men came to retaliate 2 nights later, they found the Alliance ranches lit up and guarded. Too many people awake to try anything without witnesses. The harassment went both ways for weeks. Granger's men would strike. The Alliance would strike back. Fences fell, cattle moved, supplies went missing. It was chaos, and it was messy, and nobody was winning. But nobody was losing anymore either, and for the first time since this started, Coulter felt like they had a chance. The stalemate held through May and into early June. Granger's men would probe for weaknesses. The Alliance would push back. and both sides bled resources neither could afford to lose. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't surrender either. Then everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Naomi missed breakfast. Coulter found her in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed looking pale. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine, just tired." "You've been tired a lot lately. It's been a hard few months?" She stood, swayed slightly, and had to catch herself on the bedpost. Coulter was beside her in 2 steps. "That's not just tired." "I'm fine," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "When's the last time you had your monthly?" The question hung in the air. Naomi's face went from pale to ashen. "I don't know, March maybe? I thought it was just stress." "That was 3 months ago." They stared at each other as the implications settled in. "I could just be late," Naomi said, but even she didn't sound convinced. "Or you could be pregnant." The word felt too big for the room, too big for the moment. They were in the middle of a range war, barely holding their own against a man who wanted to destroy them, and now this. "We should see the doctor," Coulter said. "We can't afford—" "We're seeing the doctor." Dr. Patricia Chen ran a small practice in Lewiston. She was a Chinese woman who'd trained in San Francisco and moved to Wyoming when her husband took a mining job. Most of the town treated her with suspicion. A foreign woman practicing medicine seemed wrong to them. But she was the only real doctor within 50 miles, so people used her services while pretending not to trust her. She examined Naomi in a back room while Coulter waited outside, trying not to pace a hole in the floor. When they emerged 20 minutes later, Dr. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "You're pregnant," she told Naomi. "About 12 weeks, I'd estimate. Due in late November, early December." The confirmation landed like a physical blow. Coulter had suspected, but hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that turned his stomach inside out. "Is she healthy?" he asked. "The baby? So far, yes. But Mrs. Hayes is underweight for her stage of pregnancy, which concerns me." Dr. Chen looked at Naomi. "You've lost weight recently?" "Some. The work's been hard." "You need to ease up, get more rest, eat more. Pregnancy is demanding under the best circumstances, and you're not in the best circumstances." "I can't just stop working. We're in the middle of—" Naomi stopped, glanced at Coulter. Dr. Chen wasn't stupid. She'd heard the rumors about the range war. "Whatever you're in the middle of, it's not worth risking your life or your baby's. I'm serious about this. Less physical labor, more food, more sleep. If you don't take care of yourself, you could miscarry, or worse." "What's worse?" Coulter asked. "Pregnancy complications, bleeding, premature labor. In a remote area like yours, those things can be fatal." Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make sure you understand the stakes. This is a dangerous time to be pregnant on a mountain ranch with no nearby medical care." Outside the office, walking back to the wagon, Naomi finally spoke. "You're thinking we should sell to Granger." "I'm thinking we should consider it." "No." "Naomi, no." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "I heard what the doctor said. I'll rest more, eat more, be careful. But I'm not giving up our home because I'm pregnant. Women have babies in hard places all the time. And women die in hard places all the time. You heard her, complications, bleeding, premature labor. Any of those things happen, and we're hours from help. So we're careful." "Careful doesn't stop accidents." Coulter felt panic rising in his chest. "I can't lose you. I can't lose both of you." "You won't. You don't know that. And you don't know we'd lose the baby if we stayed. You're catastrophizing." She took his hands. "I understand you're scared. I'm scared too. But running away doesn't guarantee safety. It just guarantees we lose the ranch for certain. The ranch doesn't matter. It does to me. This is the first place I've ever belonged, Coulter. The first place where I matter. I'm not giving that up." They rode home in tense silence. That night, lying in bed, Coulter tried again. "What if we just stopped fighting? Didn't sell, but didn't retaliate either. Just focused on the ranch, on keeping you and the baby safe." "Granger won't stop just because we do." "Maybe he would if we weren't a threat anymore. We're a threat because we exist, because we won't sell. He'll keep coming whether we fight back or not." She rolled to face him. "I know you want to protect me, but wrapping me in cotton won't keep me safe. This place, this life, it's inherently dangerous. Being pregnant doesn't change that. It changes everything. For you, maybe. For me, it changes our timeline. We have 6 months to either win this fight or figure out a different solution, but we don't quit. Coulter wanted to argue more, but he could see it was pointless. Naomi had made her decision, so he made his own. If she wouldn't quit, he'd make sure she at least didn't have to fight alone. The next morning, he called another alliance meeting. We need to end this, he told the assembled ranchers. Not slow it down, not manage it, end it, one way or another. How? Margaret asked. We make Granger's operation too expensive to maintain. He's got maybe 20 hired men spread across his entire operation. We've got 8 ranches with full-time residents. If we coordinate properly, we can make him bleed money faster than he makes it. Tom shook his head. We've been trying that. It's not working fast enough. Because we've been defensive, reacting to his moves instead of forcing him to react to ours. Coulter spread a map on the table. He's got 3 line shacks in the high country where his men stay during roundup. If those shacks weren't there, if his men had to ride back to the main ranch every night, it would add hours to every day's work, slow everything down. You're talking about burning them out, James said. I'm talking about doing to him what he did to Margaret. The room went quiet. That's arson, Margaret said quietly. So was what he did to you. Which the sheriff ignored. You think he'll ignore us doing the same thing? Not if we're smart about it. We pick a night when we know his men are elsewhere. Make it look like an accident. Granger can suspect all he wants. He can't prove anything without admitting his men weren't where they were supposed to be. And if someone gets hurt, Tom asked, we make sure nobody's inside first. This isn't about killing people. It's about breaking his ability to operate efficiently. The discussion went on for another hour. Half the group thought it was too risky. The other half thought they were already past the point of playing safe. In the end, they voted. 5-3 in favor of proceeding. Naomi, who'd been quiet through the whole meeting, pulled Coulter aside after the others left. I don't like this, she said. You voted for it. Because I understand why it's necessary. That doesn't mean I like it. She looked at him hard. Promise me you won't get caught. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. And promise me you'll come home. Because I can't do this alone. I can't raise a baby alone in this place. You won't have to. 2 nights later, under a new moon, 6 riders approached Granger's northernmost line shack. They'd spent the previous day confirming it was empty. The men who normally used it were helping with a roundup 15 miles south. The shack was rough construction, meant to last a season or 2 before being replaced. Dry wood, poor ventilation, perfect for what they needed. Coulter felt sick doing it. This wasn't who he was, sneaking around in the dark, setting fires. But Granger had set the rules of this engagement, and you didn't win by refusing to play. They soaked the base of the shack with kerosene, laid a trail leading away, lit it, and rode hard. The fire took fast. By the time they were a mile away, flames were visible against the night sky. They hit the other 2 line shacks over the next week. Same method, same care to ensure nobody was inside. 3 shacks gone, and Granger's summer operation crippled. The response was immediate and brutal. Granger's men came at the Alliance ranches in force, not sneaking around anymore, open aggression. They cut fences in broad daylight, drove off cattle while the owners watched, and when anyone tried to stop them, Dutch Keller would smile and say, "Call the sheriff if you've got a problem," knowing the sheriff wouldn't do anything. One afternoon, Coulter was repairing fence when he saw 5 riders approaching, Dutch, and 4 others. "Coulter Hayes," Dutch called out. "Got a message from Mr. Granger." Coulter set down his tools, made sure his rifle was within reach. "I'm listening." "Boss wants you to know he appreciates the creativity. Burning his line shacks. Real clever." Dutch grinned. "But cleverness only gets you so far. He's giving you one last chance to sell. Tomorrow, noon, his office. You don't show up, he stops being patient. Tell Granger I'll think about it." "Thinking time's over. This is your final offer." After they left, Coulter stood there feeling the weight of it. The end game was here. Either they found a way to stop Granger now, or everything they'd fought for was lost. That night, he found Naomi in the garden she'd planted back in early spring. It was thriving now. Lettuce, carrots, peas climbing strings. A small miracle in hard ground. "Dutch came by," he said. She didn't look up from her weeding. "I saw. What did he want?" "Final offer to sell, tomorrow at noon." "Are you going?" "No." But Granger's done playing games. Whatever comes next is going to be worse than what we've dealt with so far. Naomi sat back on her heels. At 4 months pregnant, she was starting to show. Not much, her size hid it well, but enough that Coulter could see the changes when he looked. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what happens if we lose. If Granger takes the ranch. We're not gonna—" "Let me finish." She brushed dirt from her hands. "If we lose, I want us to leave Wyoming. Go somewhere new. California, maybe. Or Oregon. Start over completely." "Naomi, I mean it. I don't want to stay in a place where Granger won, where every day we'd have to see what used to be ours being run by someone who stole it. I'd rather have nothing in a new place than live in the shadow of this failure." Coulter sat down beside her in the dirt. "We're not going to lose. You keep saying that, but you don't know it's true." "No, but I believe it." He took her hand. "We've survived everything this place and Granger have thrown at us. We'll survive this too. I'm tired, Coulter. Tired of fighting, tired of being scared, tired of wondering if today's the day something terrible happens." "I know. And I'm scared for the baby. What kind of world are we bringing a child into, where people like Granger can just take what they want and nobody stops them? The kind of world where people like us teach our kids to fight back. To not accept that might makes right." He squeezed her hand. "Our baby's going to grow up knowing their mother ran into a burning barn to save horses, that their father stood up to a bully even when it seemed hopeless. That's worth something. Is it worth dying for?" The question hung between them. "I don't want to die," Coulter said quietly, "and I sure as hell don't want you or our baby to die. But I also don't want to live knowing I gave up when I could have kept fighting." Naomi was quiet for a long time, looking at her garden. "If we do this, if we keep fighting, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If it comes down to choosing between winning and keeping our family safe, you choose family, every time, no hesitation. I promise. Say it like you mean it." He turned her to face him. "If it comes down to choosing between this ranch and you and our baby, I choose you, every time. The ranch is just land. You're everything." She kissed him then, soft and sad. "Okay, then we keep fighting." The next day, noon came and went without Coulter appearing at Granger's office. He spent it instead reinforcing fence lines and preparing for retaliation. It came that night. Riders approached the ranch after dark, at least a dozen of them, far more than Granger had ever sent before. They spread out surrounding the property, torches visible in the darkness. Coulter had been expecting something like this. He'd sent word to the Alliance earlier that day, and within an hour of the riders appearing, ranchers started arriving. Margaret showed up first with 3 of her hands, then Tom with 2 more, then James and the others. By the time Dutch called out from the darkness, there were 15 armed people defending the Hayes ranch. "Coulter Hayes!" Dutch's voice echoed across the yard. "Last chance, come out and let's talk terms." "Nothing to talk about," Coulter shouted back. "You're trespassing. Leave before someone gets hurt. Boss is tired of playing nice. You don't sell, he's taking the ranch anyway. Can do this easy or hard. Your choice." "I'm not choosing either. Tell Granger to go to hell." There was a long pause. Then Dutch laughed. "All right, hard way it is." The first shots came from the tree line. Warning shots, probably meant to scare rather than kill, but close enough to send everyone diving for cover. Coulter returned fire, aiming high. He didn't want bloodshed if it could be avoided, but he needed Granger's men to know they'd shoot back. The standoff lasted 20 minutes. Shots exchanged, people yelling, but nobody seriously hurt. Then, from the direction of town, a bell started ringing. The church bell, used to signal emergencies. The shooting stopped. Everyone could hear horses approaching from Lewiston. A lot of horses. Dutch's men pulled back, melting into the darkness. The riders from town arrived minutes later. Not Granger's men, but townspeople. Vernon Kirkland was in the lead, which shocked Coulter more than the gunfight had. "What's going on?" Vernon demanded. "Granger's trying to run us off," Margaret said. "We heard shots. Thought someone was being attacked." Vernon looked around at the armed ranchers. "This is getting out of hand." "Tell that to Granger," Tom said. Vernon was quiet for a moment. Then, surprisingly, he sighed. "Look, I haven't been fair to you folks, especially you, Mrs. Hayes. I judged before I knew anything, and that was wrong." Naomi, who'd been watching from the cabin porch with a rifle, stepped forward. "What changed your mind?" My daughter. Vernon looked uncomfortable. She's in a family way. Started showing recently, and people have been talking, saying ugly things about her weight, about whether she can handle motherhood, all kinds of cruel nonsense. Made me realize how I've been treating you all this time, how I've been treating a lot of people. That's supposed to make it better? Tom asked. No, just explaining why I'm here. Vernon turned to Coulter. Granger's gone too far. Shooting at people on their own property crosses a line. Some of us in town were not okay with that. Sheriff won't do anything, Coulter said. Sheriff's one man. Town's a lot more. Granger might have money, but he doesn't have enough to buy off everyone. Vernon gestured to the people behind him. We're here to help, however we can. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next week brought an uneasy quiet. Granger's men backed off, probably regrouping. The townspeople who'd ridden out, about 20 of them, started taking shifts watching the Alliance ranches. It wasn't professional security, but it was bodies and eyes and people who'd bear witness if Granger tried something. Naomi, meanwhile, grew visibly weaker. She was eating more, resting more, doing everything Dr. Chen had ordered, but the pregnancy was taking its toll. She tired easily, got dizzy when she stood too fast, and had started having trouble sleeping. This is normal, Dr. Chen assured them during a checkup. Uncomfortable, but normal. The baby's growing well. Heart rate is strong. When will she start feeling better? Coulter asked. Second trimester is usually easier, but every pregnancy is different. Some women feel great. Others struggle the whole way through. She looked at Naomi. You're doing everything right. Just keep listening to your body. On the ride back from town, Naomi was quiet. What are you thinking? Coulter asked. That I'm useless right now. Everyone's fighting, and I'm too tired to even help with chores. You're growing a human. That's not useless. Feels useless when there's so much work to do. The work will get done. You focus on staying healthy. She didn't respond, just stared out at the passing landscape. That night, Coulter woke to find her side of the bed empty. He found her outside, sitting on the porch steps, looking at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked. Baby's moving. Keeps me awake. That's good though, right? Means it's healthy. Yeah. She didn't sound happy about it. Coulter sat beside her. What's really wrong? I'm scared. About childbirth. About whether I can do this. About what happens if something goes wrong. Her voice cracked. Dr. Chen was nice about it, but I could tell she's worried about my weight, about delivering up here so far from help. She thinks I should go to Denver a month before my due date. Stay there until the baby comes. Then we'll do that. We can't afford it, and we can't leave the ranch undefended for that long. I don't care about the ranch if it means you and the baby are safe. You say that now. But if Granger takes everything while we're gone, then he takes it. Material things can be rebuilt. You can't. He put his arm around her. We'll figure it out. Maybe we sell some cattle early, get the money for Denver. Maybe we ask the Alliance to watch the place while we're gone. There are options. What if I'm a terrible mother? The question came out small and scared. You won't be. You don't know that. I don't know anything about babies. What if I do everything wrong? What if... Naomi, stop. He pulled her closer. You saved horses from a burning barn. You walked into a blizzard to find me. You've stood up to everyone who ever tried to make you feel small. You'll figure out how to be a mother the same way you've figured out everything else, by refusing to quit. She leaned into him, and they sat there in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. 3 days later, everything came to a head. Sheriff Porter rode up to the ranch looking grim. Coulter, need to talk to you. About what? Arthur Granger filed charges. Says you and your allies burned his property, stole his cattle, and threatened his life. There's warrants for your arrest. Yours, Margaret Keating's, Tom Bidwell's, and 4 others. Coulter felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. That's garbage. He's the one who's been stealing and burning. I know. But he's got lawyers and documentation, and I've got warrants. I have to bring you in. And if I don't go? Then I'll have to come back with deputies. And this gets ugly. Porter looked genuinely regretful. I'm sorry, Coulter. I tried to fight this, but the judge, he's in Granger's pocket. The warrants are legal even if the charges ain't. How long? Trial's set for next week. If you've got evidence of Granger's wrongdoing, bring it. Otherwise, he didn't finish. Naomi appeared in his doorway. What happens if he goes to jail? Depends on the trial. Could be a fine, could be a year in territorial prison, could be... Porter stopped, not wanting to say it. Could be hanging, Naomi finished, for arson and theft. It won't come to that, Porter said quickly. Nobody's going to hang over a property dispute. But his tone said he wasn't sure. After Porter left, agreeing to give Coulter until the next morning to turn himself in, Coulter and Naomi stood in the cabin trying to process it. This is it, Coulter said. This is how he wins. Gets me thrown in jail. Probably Margaret and Tom, too. While we're locked up, he takes the ranches. Then don't turn yourself in. I have to. If I run, I'm a fugitive. They'll hunt me down and it'll be worse. So what do? Coulter thought hard. We fight it in court. Bring every piece of evidence we have. Get people to testify about what Granger's done. Make enough noise that the judge can't just ignore it. The judge is bought. Maybe, but there'll be a jury. 12 people from around the territory. Granger can't have bought all of them. He grabbed paper and started writing. We need to get word to everyone who's been hurt by Granger. Get them to Lewiston for the trial. Pack the courtroom. Make it impossible to sweep this under the rug. What about me? Naomi asked. You stay here. Keep the ranch running. Alone? I'll ask the Alliance to send people. You won't be alone. Coulter, this is non-negotiable. You're 5 months pregnant. You're not getting dragged into a courtroom battle, and you're definitely not running a ranch alone. For once, she didn't argue. The next morning, Coulter turned himself in. So did Margaret, Tom, and the others named in the warrants. They were processed, charged, and locked in Lewiston's small jail to await trial. The week dragged by. Coulter's cell was cramped, cold, and gave him too much time to think. About Naomi alone on the ranch, about the baby growing inside her, about everything that could go wrong. Margaret was in the cell next to his. You think we got a chance? She asked one night. Honestly, I don't know. Me either. She was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about my barn, about my horses burning, about how nobody cared until it was too late. Makes me wonder if justice even exists out here. It has to, Coulter said. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? The trial started on a Monday. The courthouse was packed. Alliance members, townspeople, and a lot of faces Coulter didn't recognize. People who'd heard about the case and came to watch. Granger sat in the front row looking confident. The prosecution went first. They presented a compelling case: burned line shacks, missing cattle, witness statements from Granger's men. It all sounded damning when laid out like that. Then the defense got their turn. Coulter's lawyer, a young man named Samuel Pierce, who'd recently moved to Wyoming and hadn't yet learned to be corrupt, called witness after witness. People who'd lost livestock to Granger. People who'd had their fences cut. Margaret testified about her barn, about how Granger's men had locked her horses inside before lighting it. The courtroom murmured. Some people looked shocked, but the judge, an old man named Cyrus Hammond, seemed unmoved. On the third day of trial, Naomi appeared in the courtroom. Coulter's heart nearly stopped. She was supposed to stay at the ranch, stay safe, not be here. But there she was, walking up the aisle, visibly pregnant now, and every eye in the room followed her. She took the witness stand. Mrs. Hayes, Pierce said, can you tell the court what you've experienced since arriving in Wyoming? Naomi told it all. The stolen cattle, the cut fences, the harassment, Vernon Kirkland's initial cruelty and eventual change of heart, Granger's threats, the fire at Margaret's barn and how she'd saved the horses. She spoke clearly, calmly, with the kind of quiet strength that made people listen. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. The prosecutor stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Hayes, isn't it true that you have a financial interest in the outcome of this trial? That if your husband is convicted, you lose your ranch? Yes. So we should take your testimony with some skepticism. You can take it however you want, Naomi said, but I'm telling the truth. Arthur Granger has terrorized small ranchers for 2 years. He's stolen, burned, and intimidated his way to building his empire. And he's done it knowing the law wouldn't stop him because he owns the people who are supposed to enforce it. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. The sheriff knows it. The judge knows it. She looked directly at Judge Hammond. And you know it too, Your Honor. The question is whether you'll do what's right or what's profitable. The courtroom exploded in murmurs. Judge Hammond banged his gavel. Mrs. Hayes, you will refrain from such accusations, or I'll hold you in contempt. Hold me in contempt, then, Naomi said. I'm 5 months pregnant, exhausted, and done pretending this is a fair process. Arthur Granger is guilty of everything we're accused of, and more. If this court can't see that, it's not because of lack of evidence. It's because it doesn't want to see. The judge's face went red. Remove her from the courtroom. 2 bailiffs moved toward Naomi, but she stood on her own, walking down the aisle with her head high. As she passed Granger, she stopped. You think you've won, she said quietly, but loud enough for the room to hear. But you haven't, because even if you take our ranch, even if you destroy everything we've built, you'll never take away what we are, and what we are is stronger than anything money can buy. Then she walked out. The trial concluded the next day. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning with a verdict. Guilty on all charges. Coulter felt the word like a punch. Beside him, Margaret made a small sound of grief. Tom just shook his head. Judge Hammond sentenced them to fines they couldn't pay and land seizures to cover the debt. Everything they owned would go to Granger to compensate for damages. It was over. They'd lost. Coulter walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight that felt wrong. The world should have been dark, storming, something that matched the hollowness in his chest. Instead, it was just another June day in Wyoming, indifferent to whether he'd won or lost everything. Naomi was waiting by the wagon. She didn't ask about the verdict. She could read it on his face. How long do we have? She asked. 30 days to vacate, pay the fines, or forfeit the property. And we can't pay. No. She climbed onto the wagon seat, moving carefully with her pregnant belly. Then we have 30 days to figure out what comes next. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Coulter kept thinking about all the ways he'd failed. Failed to protect his land. Failed to beat Granger. Failed to provide security for his wife and unborn child. The weight of it pressed down until he could barely breathe. At the ranch, Margaret's horse was tied outside. She was sitting on the porch steps, looking as defeated as Coulter felt. Tom's heading to California, she said without preamble. Leaving next week. Says there's nothing left for him here. What about you? Naomi asked. Don't know yet. My land's seized too. Everything I built for 20 years gone. Margaret's voice cracked. I keep thinking there must be something we can do, some way to fight this, but I'm too tired to think of what it is. Inside the cabin, Coulter poured whiskey for all of them. They sat at the table that had hosted so many strategy meetings, so many plans that had ultimately failed. We could appeal, Margaret said, but without conviction. To who? Coulter asked. Higher courts cost money we don't have, and Granger probably owns those judges too. So we just accept it, let him win? I don't know what else to do. Naomi had been quiet, staring at her untouched whiskey. There's one thing we haven't tried. What's that? Margaret asked. Telling the truth to someone who might actually care. We tried that. Governor, newspapers, the court, not them. Regular people, the ones who don't have a stake in Granger's corruption. Naomi looked up. What if we took our story directly to the public? Not through newspapers or politicians, just stood up and told people what happened. Where? Coulter asked. Everywhere. Cheyenne, Denver, every town between here and there. Tell anyone who'll listen about what Granger did, about how the courts failed us. Make enough noise that eventually someone with real power has to pay attention. That could take months. We don't have months. So we do it fast. A circuit of the major towns, 2 weeks, maybe 3. If it works, great. If it doesn't, she shrugged. At least we tried everything. Margaret shook her head. I can't. I'm too tired, too broken. I'm going to sell what I can carry and leave before Granger's men come to take the rest. After Margaret left, Coulter looked at his wife. You're serious about this? You have a better idea? No. But you're 5 months pregnant, traveling rough, speaking in public, dealing with who knows what kind of reaction. I know the risks. Then why? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting men like Granger decide how my story ends. She stood, paced to the window. My whole life, people told me I was too much or not enough. Too fat, too loud, too visible. And I believed them. Made myself smaller, quieter, less. Then I came here and learned I didn't have to do that. Learned I could take up space without apologizing. She turned to face him. Granger wants us to disappear quietly, to slink away ashamed. And maybe that's the smart thing to do, but I'm done being smart if it means being invisible. I want people to know what happened here. Even if it changes nothing, I want our story told. Coulter studied her. This woman who'd stepped off a stagecoach 10 months ago and turned his entire world upside down. Who'd saved his life in a blizzard, run into a burning barn, stood up to a courtroom and called out corruption to the judge's face. All right, he said, we'll do it your way. They left 3 days later with almost nothing. A wagon, 2 horses, enough supplies for 2 weeks, and a stack of documents detailing everything Granger had done. Coulter had asked the other Alliance members to watch the ranch in their absence, though everyone knew it was probably pointless. Granger would take it whether they were there or not. Their first stop was a town called Rawlins, 40 miles east. It was a railroad junction, which meant people passing through, which meant potential audience. They set up in the town square on a Saturday morning. Naomi stood on the back of the wagon while Coulter distributed handbills he'd printed in Lewiston. The handbills were simple, just the facts of what had happened laid out plainly. At first, people ignored them. Then a few stopped to read. Then a few more. Naomi started talking. My name is Naomi Hayes. 6 months ago, I traveled from Pennsylvania to marry a rancher I'd never met. People in his town judged me before I ever lifted a finger, said I was too fat to be useful, too soft to survive mountain winters, probably just a burden on a man desperate enough to send for a mail-order bride. A crowd was gathering now, maybe 20 people, curious about the pregnant woman making a speech in public. They were wrong about me, but this isn't about proving them wrong, it's about what happened after. She told the story simply, without embellishment. Granger's theft and intimidation, the burned barn, the corrupt trial, the seizure of land. We lost, she said. Arthur Granger won because he had more money and better connections. And now we're here, telling anyone who'll listen what happened. Not because we think it'll change anything, but because silence is how men like Granger keep winning. When she finished, the crowd stood silent. Then a woman in the back spoke up. Why should we care? This is your problem, not ours. You're right, Naomi said. It is my problem. Until it's yours. Until someone with money and influence decides they want what you have and takes it because the system lets them. Then you'll understand why someone needs to speak up before it's too late. A man in coveralls pushed forward. I heard about Granger. Heard he's been buying up land. Didn't realize he was doing it like this. Most people don't realize, Coulter said. That's what we're trying to change. The crowd dispersed eventually, some people nodding sympathetically, others dismissing it as someone else's problem. But a few stayed behind, asked questions, took extra handbills to share. It wasn't much, but it was something. They repeated the process in Rock Springs, then Green River, then towns whose names Coulter barely remembered. Sometimes they drew crowds of 50 people, sometimes only 5. Sometimes nobody stopped at all, and they stood in empty squares talking to the wind. Naomi was tireless. Despite being pregnant and exhausted, she climbed onto that wagon every time and told their story. Her voice got hoarse. Her feet swelled. But she never complained. In a town called Laramie, a newspaper editor approached them after their speech. Henry Walsh, he introduced himself. From the Cheyenne Leader, you came to my office a few months back. I remember, Naomi said. You said we didn't have a story. I was wrong. Walsh pulled out a notebook. Mind if I ask some questions? The interview took an hour. Walsh was thorough, skeptical, pushing back on claims that seemed too convenient, but by the end he was nodding. This is good, he said. Really good. I'll run it next week. Front page. Why now? Coulter asked. Why believe us now when you didn't before? Before, you were asking me to take your word against Granger's. Now you've spent 2 weeks telling your story in public, and people are listening. That changes things. Makes it newsworthy. The article ran the following Tuesday. Walsh had titled it, The Range War Nobody Noticed, and laid out everything. Granger's methods, the corrupt trial, the seizure of land. He included quotes from Naomi's speeches and testimonies from other ranchers Granger had forced out. It caused a stir, not immediately, and not everywhere. But people started talking. Other newspapers picked up the story. Questions were raised about Judge Hammond's financial connections to Granger. The Territorial Attorney General's office announced an investigation. Coulter didn't let himself hope. He'd been disappointed too many times. But Naomi read the articles with something that looked like satisfaction. "See," she said, "people do care. They just needed to know." They were in Denver when the telegram came. Sheriff Porter had sent it to the hotel where they were staying. Judge Hammond removed from bench stop investigation, ordered into Granger Land acquisitions stop. Seizure of your property, suspended pending review, stop. Coulter read it 3 times, not quite believing. "Does this mean what I think it means?" Naomi asked. "I don't know. Maybe." He handed her the telegram. "Suspended isn't canceled, but it's something." They returned to Wyoming immediately. The ranch was still there, still theirs for now. The Alliance members who'd been watching it reported that Granger's men had backed off after the newspaper articles started running. "Seems like public attention made them nervous," Tom said. He'd postponed his move to California when he heard about the investigation. A week later, a federal marshal arrived. His name was Robert Crawford, and he'd been sent by the Territorial Attorney General to investigate Granger's land acquisitions. Crawford was thorough. He interviewed everyone, ranchers, townspeople, even some of Granger's former employees who'd quit rather than participate in what they knew was wrong. He examined documents, visited burned properties, compiled evidence. The investigation took 2 months. In that time, Naomi's pregnancy progressed. She was 7 months along, moving slower, sleeping more. Dr. Chen visited the ranch weekly now, monitoring her closely. "Everything looks good," the doctor said after one examination. "Baby's positioned well, heart rate strong. As long as you take it easy, I think you'll be fine delivering here." "You thought I should go to Denver before," Naomi said. "That was when you were stressed and underweight. You're healthier now, more rested, and honestly, I think the traveling would be worse for you than staying put at this point." Coulter wasn't convinced, but Naomi seemed relieved. "I want to have the baby here," she said after Dr. Chen left. "On our land. In our home. Even if we might lose it? Especially if we might lose it. So when our child asks where they were born, I can say they were born in a place worth fighting for." In September, Marshal Crawford released his findings. Arthur Granger had violated territorial land laws, engaged in systematic harassment and theft, and corrupted local officials to avoid prosecution. The marshal recommended criminal charges and restitution for affected ranchers. The Territorial Attorney General agreed. Granger was arrested on a Tuesday morning. The charges included arson, theft, bribery, and conspiracy. His assets were frozen pending trial. Coulter heard the news from Vernon Kirkland, who rode out to the ranch specifically to tell them. "Thought you'd want to know," Vernon said. "Granger's in jail. All his land holdings are tied up. Judge Hammond's been removed and is under investigation himself." "What about our seizure?" Coulter asked. "Voided. All the seizures from that trial are voided. Your land is yours again." Vernon paused. "I also wanted to apologize for how I treated you both, especially you, Mrs. Hayes. I was cruel and small-minded, and I'm sorry." Naomi, who'd been listening from the porch, nodded. "Thank you for saying that." After Vernon left, Coulter and Naomi stood in their yard, looking at the ranch that was definitively theirs again. "We won," Coulter said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We survived," Naomi corrected. "That's better than winning." The baby came on a cold November night during the year's first real snowstorm. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden crisis, no race against time. Just labor that started at sunset and progressed through the night while wind howled outside and snow piled against the cabin walls. Dr. Chen arrived around midnight, having ridden through the storm from Lewiston. Margaret came too, along with 2 other women from the Alliance who'd promised to help. Coulter was banished to the main room while they worked. He paced, made coffee nobody drank, listened to Naomi's sounds of pain, and tried not to imagine everything that could go wrong. The hours dragged. Around 3 in the morning, he heard Naomi scream, a sound of pure effort and pain that made him start toward the bedroom before Margaret intercepted him. "She's fine," Margaret said. "Baby's coming. Just stay here." "I should be with her." "You'll be in the way. Trust Dr. Chen. She knows what she's doing." More time passed. More sounds. Then, finally, a different sound. A baby crying. Coulter's knees went weak. Dr. Chen emerged 5 minutes later, wiping her hands. "You have a daughter. Mother and baby are both healthy." He went into the bedroom. Naomi was propped up on pillows, looking exhausted and triumphant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. The baby was red-faced and squalling, tiny fists waving. "She's loud," Naomi said, smiling. Coulter sat on the edge of the bed, looking at his daughter. She was impossibly small, impossibly perfect, impossibly his. "Want to hold her?" Naomi asked. He took the baby carefully, terrified of breaking something. She fit in his arms like she was made for that space. When he looked down at her face, she stopped crying and looked back with unfocused eyes. "Hi," he said stupidly. "I'm your father." The baby made a small sound. "What are we naming her?" Naomi asked. They'd discussed names for months without settling on anything, but looking at his daughter now, only one name felt right. "Ruth," he said, "after the mayor, after survival." Naomi smiled. "Ruth Hayes. I like it." The winter that followed was hard, but they'd expected that. What they hadn't expected was how the community rallied around them. People brought food, supplies, offers to help with ranch work while Naomi recovered. Vernon Kirkland organized a collection at his store, donations from townspeople who'd read about their fight and wanted to help. "Consider it restitution," Vernon said when he delivered $200 in cash and goods, from folks who should have helped sooner. Granger's trial happened in January. Coulter and Naomi both testified, along with dozens of others. The evidence was overwhelming. Granger was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. His land holdings were sold off, with proceeds going to restitution for the ranchers he'd harmed. Some of those ranchers used the money to rebuild. Others, like Tom, took it and left for new opportunities elsewhere. A few, like Margaret, bought portions of Granger's former empire and expanded their own operations. The range war was over. Spring came slowly that year. Snow melted grudgingly, revealing a landscape that looked the same as always but felt different. The ranch had survived. More than survived. It had won. On a warm day in early May, Coulter was repairing fence while Naomi worked in her garden with Ruth strapped to her back in a sling. The baby was 6 months old now, all chubby cheeks and curious eyes, constantly reaching for things and babbling nonsense. "She's going to be a handful," Naomi called over. "She already is," Coulter called back. He watched his wife work, this woman who'd defied every expectation, who'd been called too fat to be useful and proved herself indispensable, who'd been dismissed as a mail-order mistake and became the strongest person he knew. She'd taught him that strength wasn't about size or appearance or meeting anyone's expectations. It was about refusing to be made small by other people's limitations. That evening, after dinner, they sat on the porch while Ruth played with wooden blocks Coulter had carved. The sun was setting, painting the mountains gold and purple. "Do you ever regret it?" Naomi asked. "Answering my letter? All the trouble it brought?" Coulter thought about the blizzard that nearly killed him, the range war that nearly destroyed them, the trial that could have taken everything. "No," he said. "You?" "No." She leaned against him. "I came here looking for survival. Found something better." "What's that?" "A place where I didn't have to apologize for existing, where what I could do mattered more than what I looked like, where I could be exactly who I am and have that be enough." Ruth dropped her blocks and crawled over to them, pulling herself up on Coulter's leg. He picked her up, settled her on his lap. "What do you want for her?" Naomi asked, nodding at their daughter. "Everything we had to fight for. A world where she doesn't have to prove her worth, where people see her as she is, not as they expect her to be." "That's a lot to want." "Yeah, but if anyone can make it happen, it's her." He looked at Ruth, who was trying to grab his nose. "She's got your stubbornness. And your inability to quit when any sensible person would. That too." They sat there as the sun finished setting and the first stars appeared. The ranch stretched out around them, their land, bought with pain and defended with everything they had. It wasn't perfect. The fences still needed constant repair. The cattle still got sick. The weather still tried to kill them every winter. But it was theirs, and that made all the difference. Years later, people would tell the story of the Hayes Ranch, how a mountain cowboy and his mail-order bride stood up to corruption and won, how they fought a range war against impossible odds and survived. But that wasn't the real story. The real story was simpler and harder and more important than any range war. It was about a woman who'd spent her life being told she was too much learning she was exactly enough. About a man who'd hidden from connection, learning that love was worth the risk of loss. About both of them discovering that belonging wasn't something you found or were given. It was something you built with your own hands, one difficult day at a time. It was about the truth that size doesn't measure strength, appearance doesn't define worth, and other people's limitations don't have to become your own. It was about refusing to be made small by a world that preferred you invisible. And it was about the stubborn, imperfect, entirely human choice to keep fighting for the things that mattered, even when fighting seemed pointless, even when winning seemed impossible, even when every sensible person said to quit. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do